Hey TYT, I'm Nomiki Konst here in Detroit for the first Women's Convention brought to you by the Women's March. And we have one of the organizers, the lead organizers, the national co-chair and co-president of the Women's March, Bob Bland. You've been doing amazing work around the Women's March and the convention, and this entire weekend has been so inspirational for so many different types of people that either knew what they were getting into coming here in the beginning, or have been inspired and learned so much and have become awakened post Women's March, and obviously here with all the panels. So thank you so much for taking the time and giving us a space.
Oh yeah, well, I'm a fan of the Young Turks and particularly your work, so thank you for sharing this with your audience.
Thank you. So many folks know about the Women's March, obviously, but you were there at the beginning. How did this all start? Where did this come from?
So the way this started was through a couple Facebook events, and it's a true testament to the way that social media has affected movement spaces, because 10 years ago this sort of story would not have happened. When I woke up on November 9th, the day after the election, I had a choice. I could call in sick, put the covers over my head, and just cry for 24 hours, or I could do something. And because of my background as a solutionist in the fashion industry, doing work around systemic dysfunction within our supply chains and then within the industry in general, I very much had keyed into, even despite all the emotions I was feeling that day, that there had to be something more to this. There had to be something we could do that would elevate this conversation and not just be like, oh, well, now we're fascist, so I got online. I had a big following already around a Nasty Woman t-shirt I had done that went viral after the third debate. So people were like, Bob, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I'm like, we should march on Washington inauguration weekend. And it really was just like coming out of the air. And one thing I can tell you as a creative is that it's no coincidence, those cues that we get, the things that are the first thing on the top of your mind, it's all part of this collective cultural unconscious that we all have, that's informed by our shared history or unhistory, because what I found out afterwards is that there's a lot of things that I thought I knew that I didn't know. And a lot of what the convention is here today is the beginning of a lot of the unlearning we need to do the deep learning we must have to move forward with context and with purpose. So at that time, I was a neophyte to activism, to organizing. I was incredibly well versed in my industry and in advocacy work, so I had seen what I could do at the local, state, and national level politically, but I had never applied it to my womanhood. I hadn't even really considered that was not an identity I really clung to. I was a designer, I was a manufacturer. It wasn't really till I became a mother that I noticed, like, oh wow, all my male friends ghosted. Where did they go? Like,
when you became a mother?
Oh yeah. And it wasn't like, I think it's just we haven't socialized our men in the last 30, 40 years or so to really be integrated in a community, family way into people's life after a certain point. And so what I noticed was that when I got, when I got engaged, and when I got married, then when I got pregnant, and then when I had a baby, every time there was like a little sloughing of male company that I didn't have anymore in my life. And the diehards, the ones that'll still hold the baby, are with me to this day. But I think that that was the only time in my life that I had really considered things through the context of a gender lens. And that unconsciousness is why sexism structurally in our society flourishes is the system is designed for us to pay attention to everything but that, to not prioritize our womanhood. So none of that has to do directly with the origin story of the march, but it is all to say that it was an awakening for me on November 9th that it turns out was shared by a woman named Teresa Shook, who is a grandmother and a lawyer in Hawaii. You couldn't get farther away. We definitely had no mutual Facebook friends. And after I had about like 2,000, 3,000 people saying that they were going to my March event, I got a phone call from a good friend who was like, Bob, you'll never believe it. And she sent me the link to Teresa's event, which at that point had like around 12,000 people who were going. And it was like, damn, like anytime that you have an idea, you gotta know there's at least like 5 to 10 people who have the same idea at the exact same time. So I reached out to Teresa on Facebook Messenger, just totally cold. And it was incredible to reach out to her, to reach out to other people, and to get messages back, and then to be instantly connected around this shared purpose. And that's really what the convention and the movement needs to be about, is around us identifying a shared sense of purpose, and then a shared set of values, and then a shared agenda that we can all have moving forward. It doesn't mean we have to agree with each other. It does not mean unity. It does not mean uniformity, as my sister Linda Sarzar said in one of her panels the other day. But there needs to be a sense of why are we doing this? And certainly in that moment, everybody knew that they had to march to protect the most marginalized among us. But then there's the how of doing that.
So what are these, you talk about what you stand for, and I know there's the unity principles, and the origins of that were around the march. Can you talk about that space in between the Facebook, finding out that there are other folks who were planning the same thing, and so many thousands of women who were excited to mobilize, and then how it turned into what you stood for?
So the first 72 hours were absolutely bananas, because we, and in the best way possible, it had to happen this way. It was terrifying at the time to be receiving, as someone who was not a personality before this, I had never gone viral before, to be receiving thousands of comments, thousands of Facebook messages from people I don't know, just being inundated by emails. And what I knew as someone coming from the business space was the customer's always right. So I was already inclined and programmed to really listen to things. And I had done a ton of crowdfunding before, so both for my own business and then for other startups as part of my career. So it was really important for me to listen to and respond without judgment what people were saying. And the feedback across the board was, you have to center people of color. You are using a name that is offensive. And so we were originally the Million Women March. People don't remember this. And that was just the first thing that came to Teresa's head, again, because of that unconscious shared cultural memory. But the thing about that is it's oftentimes just another mechanism of white supremacy, because it's so easy for white people to just pick and choose the culture that they want to put out there without ever attributing it to its original owners. Like similar to what we saw with, and most of the time it's done with the best intentions, right. So with like Tarana Burke, 10 years she's been doing the Me Too campaign, and for Alyssa Milano to not even know that she was stepping on someone's toe, I have a lot of sympathy for that, because that was definitely the situation that I was in. And it definitely is very important to respond immediately and decisively to say, I messed up.
Yes.
To take full accountability and to say, this is wrong and this is an example of what should not be done, and we have to move forward honoring and learning from our mistakes and doing better. And so all of that was happening like within 24 hours, while our numbers went from 100,000 saying they were going to 250,000 people saying they were going, to us going from 0 to over 30 state chapters of March mobilization in 48 hours. You know, so this is all happening at the same time to definitely non-woke white women. One of the messages I received on Facebook from a stranger out of all those thousands was from a woman named Vanessa Rubel, who happened to know these 3 activists in the field, Tamika Mallory, Linda Sarsour, and Carmen Perez. And so I was so grateful to have someone say, hey, you have to center women of color in leadership, and here are some people I recommend, because that was the missing link for me as someone who had never organized in this space before. And I credit Tamika, Carmen, and Linda endlessly with seeing the potential of the march and seeing that with these sheer numbers, if they had the vision to say, as members of Justice League NYC, who had been doing this organizing work for years, they were able to say, if we come in and lead this, we can actually take this as an opportunity to shift feminism in a different direction that is intersectional, that centers Black and brown people and their issue areas as feminism, and say this is what feminism looks like. And so it was amazing from our very first meeting. They always have a take no prisoners, get shit done attitude, and that I really admire. And so we just started getting to work right away with a beautiful manifesto that was crafted by us as a group with the help of our now head of communications, Cassidy Fendlay. And we crafted that manifesto over the course of a weekend. And from that was born our unity principles, which were then basically expanded on, because we said why we were marching, but a lot of people over time, as it got closer to the march, wanted to say, well, what are we marching for? And what are those principles? They wanted to have more depth. And so Carmen put together a group of 27 individuals from across all of the different issue areas and identities that we were exploring through Women's March to create unity principles. And these were all rooted also in the principles of Kingsian nonviolence. And it was such a learning experience for myself and other organizers who were just getting started.